Good afternoon, Arroyo World. It's Brad Wood here. I'm the Chief Revenue and Customer Officer for Arroyo, and I have got my great friend and business partner, Greg Dunaway, here with me, and we are talking about what is most top of mind for everybody today. Today was Freedom Day, Executive Order Day. We have been rescheduled. It's amazing. We're all celebrating, but are we? Are we having a little bit of a we rescheduled moment? What do you think, Greg?
I mean, it's a historic day. Don't get me wrong. There is a lot of celebration to be had. Look, there are no doubt good things that are happening today. The elimination of the 280E tax, great for business. But we should have a very realistic discussion about what this really means and who is really benefiting from this rescheduling and what it might look like 6, 18, 24 months from now, because I do think there's a lot to read into that executive order now that it's been published.
I agree. I just like breezing through it and starting to read the detail. This is not the typical one pager, like a few paragraphs. This goes in depth, and it uses a lot of terms that may sound secular, but are very, very specific to rulemaking. And I like the average operator that are out there is probably going, woohoo! I think sophisticated people with large legal departments and lobbyists and all this are looking at it going, okay, this is good. Like the tax impacts are good, but the operational impacts, especially related to pharma and interstate commerce, just might get way more interesting to deal with.
Well, look, we had a referee for a long time that was a bad referee for our industry. It was the IRS. We have a new referee now. Our referee is the FDA. And the sooner that we all come to terms with that, the better off we'll be. And I'm going to key in on something that you said. One of the things that struck me in this executive order was the idea that they used a very specific FDA term. They said real world evidence. Now, we all say that. We'd say it watching, a cop show or something, right? The FDA doesn't operate like that. Real world evidence is basically data that the FDA is going to require to move forward that's gathered outside of a lab. And they've used this term many times before. So if you're, to really go out on a macro level here, Brad, there's going to be a big boy table and a kiddie table in our industry. This EO, while it may affect the kiddie table, and I'll be honest, guys, I'm talking about the rec table here. If you're a rec grower like I am, we're at the kiddie table. This is about the big boys. What they're saying is we need, GMP validated data coming out of grows that treat data seriously and have the correct SOPs and have all of that to move forward. So I think there's a lot to unpack here, but one of the key takeaways has got to be there is a distinction about who this EO is directed at. And while the kiddie table, we get the scraps of the good things, the majority of the good things are geared towards the big boys who have the ability to do the things that they've always wanted to do: go international, go over state lines, get their tax protections, and get the ability to sell more cannabis at scale.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this, and I want to say that there's not a new cop, there's a third cop, and that's the FDA, right? So we're still going to have the IRS, and we still have the complexities of the DEA, as all companies that make any Schedule III drugs do. I mean, a physician has to have a DEA license to be able to prescribe this stuff. And now we have the FDA involved as well. So we're going to have to go through the drug rulemaking process as well. And so, as you were talking, I'm sitting here contemplating, like, well, while we're saying that we're going to get this tax relief, like, is there any instance of businesses today that manufacture a Schedule III controlled pharmaceutical that's not a licensed business? So, like, how is that going to play? And I mean, nobody's talked about that. Like, okay, we're Schedule III now. Woohoo! We're in the medical market. Woohoo! Well, now you're federally regulated and not state regulated. So, what does that mean? And what's the long-term impact and outcomes of that? And like, are the feds going to do what they do and regulate around that? I said this to Daryl earlier today. In my previous life, I sold to the federal government for 15 years. They were one of my single largest customers. I've sold to the biggest agencies, including the ones that we've talked about. And you know what they're really, really good at? Is making freaking rules, right? And so, they are incredibly good at it. And they are, when you get into enforcement, the DEA and the IRS, right? Depending on the tone and tenor of the current administration, they can be really hard on that too. Now, I think from a DEA perspective, they're focused on much higher value things that decrease risk to the country. But and this is going to be, I don't think they're going to pay a bunch of attention to it because we've got this whole fentanyl thing that we've now declared as a weapon of mass destruction. But an administration change away, and that it's a different story. And so I also, the other risk, Greg, and we haven't talked about this either, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, is the other risk is that a stroke of the pen and the attorney general took it off. Let's just say that the next attorney general comes along and doesn't like it, and a stroke of the pen, and it's gone. That's the downside with all these executive orders and it not being legislatively approved. I mean, I think that this is a Band-Aid, but just like we saw with the Farm Bill, right? The current legislative environment is that they don't care. Like McConnell, and I call him out, I'll say it all day long. McConnell put into this spending bill to close the loophole that he created in the Farm Bill, but he also just crushed a $26 billion a year business, according to Bo Whitney, like that, gone, evaporated in 329 more days. So, I mean, although I'm celebrating and I'm super happy, it's going to return some capital to the market and all this, I'm like, what happens in 3 years? What happens in 8 years? It puts us in a little bit of a precarious situation. Does it get moved back because somebody is, thinks that, it's the devil's harvest all over again, right? So I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the ideal would have obviously been a legislative play that had stalled out in the Congress and particularly in the Senate. It wasn't going to happen. And I think the thinking here by Kim Rivers and others is, the Pandora's box that works both ways. Once this Pandora's box is opened, the research begins, the funds flow in. There may be more incentive to do things like, to actually do the Safe Banking Act, to actually architect some real legislation. But it just was not going to happen in this current makeup. And I think one of the other things to pick up on what you said, Brad, was one of the main questions I get from people is, well, what else is Schedule 3? What are we like now? Well, guess what, guys? You know what we're like now? We're like Tylenol with codeine. We're like ketamine. We're like anabolic steroids. So we're no longer heroin and cocaine. That's a win. But if you're wondering who are our playmates at Schedule 3, that's who we're playing with. So I think we have to have a really keen understanding about, what it is that was done today. We've been put into a box with other highly regulated drugs. And I think the real question that people like me are wondering is, in the history of the FDA, they don't do massive carve-outs. They don't just say, well, there's Tylenol with codeine that we like over here, but then, these states really like Tylenol with codeine, so they can distribute Tylenol with codeine, like you said. So, or like you were hinting at, there's one of the interesting things you brought up is typically how the licensing works is you have to be a registered FDA distribution center or hub or clinic for these types of Schedule 3 drugs. We don't have that in the United States. We have dispensaries that operate largely with kind of completely fragmented rules at the state level. How does that intersect with the FDA saying, you guys are ketamine? And I think one of the things that we can take a look at in the EO bill was how they treated CBD, which was, by the way, frankly, shocking to me, the amount of EO that was directed towards the CBD. I don't know how you felt about it, Brad, but there were some hints in there about that. And one of the interesting phrases they used was, they didn't say that CBD had to be regulated entirely by the FDA. They actually did carve out for the states in order for doctors to prescribe it. So it's almost like they were giving hints of how they might treat it in the future by using these specific terms. But I'll tell you what, there was nothing, what I'm going to keep calling the kiddie table for the adult rec market. There is very, very little to read into this about how they're going to treat this adult rec market.
Yeah, I mean, I just look at it like this. I mean, how many manufacturers are out there that are making ketamine, anabolic steroids, Tylenol with codeine that are not licensed by the federal government?
Zero. The answer is zero.
None. Nothing. So, like, and I realize, what I love about this country is states' rights. We've created this incredible market. Billions and billions and billions of dollars of money are moving, and people are happy with this state-driven market. But now that we've brought this federal oversight to this, is like, how is that going to change the game? And I go back to this whole like, oh crap, we just rescheduled thought of that. It like, what's the unintended consequences? And so I go back and I keep harping on the farm bill, is that it's, like, it created some unintended consequences where you had all these synthetics. So, like, what's going to be the unintended consequences of that? Time will tell. So who knows?
Yeah, my parting thought's going to be, look, I think there's some clear hints in this EO. We talked about how you can read it. If you want to be a part of the big boy table, you want to get the interstate travel, you want to get the cross state lines, you want to go international, you want to get in those markets, the government's telling you how. You better have capital and you better have data.
Yeah, I think they're going to give everybody a clear path, but you're right. It's going to take a bunch of money, and you're going to have the ability from seed to product to be able to prove what you're doing is there. And that's where, at least through the cultivation side of this, which we still got to grow plants, right? Unless we're gonna synthetically make all this stuff, go from there. So, I mean, it's going to be an interesting thing. Greg, I really appreciate your time today, man. This was super awesome. But the outcome that we're going to be looking at, and you and I should have this conversation again a year from now, is like, be careful what you wish for, or are we really good? And I think that regulators and time will tell.
You're dead on, my friend. Thank you again for the time. I'm sure we will have this conversation again.
Sounds good. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining the Arroyo Corner Conference Room. We'll catch you guys in the next run. Like and subscribe.